Hello! In this video I will show you again dozens of wild edible plants and then few words about the current world situation and then a section about really deep magic connecting to the spirits of these wild plants. So this campanula was the great surprise for me this year. It has been growing in my garden forever. I just never knew it's eatable, and not only eatable, it is almost sweet. Certainly the most fruity wild plant I have tasted so far. Another edible plant hiding amongst the raspberries, the blue flowers, their season is over. The poppy plant itself, it's actually poisonous, but its seeds are edible and tasty. They can be eaten on their own. And now let's see a few low profile, so to say, plants which are very common and very abundant. Here, hiding amongst the basil, is yet another very common edible plant. The entire plant family of this type of grasses, they're all edible. Probably the goose grass is the most common amongst them. All of them are not poisonous, and especially when they are young, they are okay in terms of taste. And this is a plant from the Rumex family. It doesn't look impressive, but as all other Rumexes, it is edible and the taste is okay for a wild plant. It's not bitter as many of the others. And here almost everything, actually everything I see is edible. All clovers are edible, the dandelions. Even grass is not toxic, although it's not extremely nutritious, because you will lose more energy to chew it than you will gain from it. But some people try to cook it and it gets easier to swallow. Here, amongst the dill sprouts, chicken weed is hiding. Again, very common. It's got also white flowers, not at the moment though. This entire plant with the white flowers, leaves and flowers, everything is edible in moderation. Yet another edible wild geranium. The beautiful big geraniums we grow in the houses, those are poisonous, but the wild geraniums are okay in moderation. Even the hosta plants are edible. Mine are sadly destroyed by young, jumping like crazy feline pests. They taste a bit like asparagus. And these purple flowers, I found only medicinal use for them. So that means that surely in moderation they should not be poisonous. Here the perennial phlox begins to bloom. All of its flowers of any color are edible, but some are much tastier than the others. As far as I remember, the sweet pink was the tastiest out of all. And the asters, these flowers, again, the entire plant is edible. This is in the mint family. It grows just everywhere, and of course it's edible as well. Also edible spice and herb. It had purple flowers. It's also known as ground cover flower. This yellow big bush is also medicinal. And yet another very common flower out there in the fields, and as everything else so far, edible as well. As well as this tiny campanula in the fields. And yet two more yellow wild varieties of flowers which are edible. This entire family of plants seems to be edible. Some of them were actually grown as vegetables previously because of their roots mainly. When the roots are young, they are very tasty. Later on in the second year, they become like wood. But the plant is edible and very, very common and huge actually in size. Here, the lilies from the previous episode, which are okay in moderation, and hiding amongst them is this white, fluffy flower thing. It's edible and reasonably tasty for a wild plant. And here, amongst the young and of course edible Saint John's wort, lurks oxalis, which is of course also edible. Like the lavender flowers, of course. And yet another extremely common in the fields plant. When it's young, you can chew on it. It is edible, kind of. When it gets older, it's just too bitter. Now, not only the fruits of the blackberry are eatable, but also its leaves, as well as the leaves of the raspberries and even the leaves of the blueberries. And even the leaves of the wild strawberries are not only edible but also medicinal. But if you're looking for leaves with really exotic flavor, nothing can beat the fig leaves, the leaves of the fig fruit. And even the leaves of the ribisol, they're all in this gooseberry family, and everything, fruit and leaves, is edible. So I showed you baby primroses, 1 year old in the previous episode. Here they are blooming, that's in the second year. And the flowers are actually quite tasty. The entire plant is of course edible if you manage somehow to cook it. Some cultures, they have found a way to cook it. The only thing that you should be careful with all these flowers is not to swallow bugs when you eat them. Because all kinds of bugs are very good in hiding inside the flowers. In general, the wisteria plants do have poisons, but even for them, the flowers are okay in moderation. You can eat a bit of wisteria flowers. So all thistles are edible. That's a relief because they grow everywhere. Even this one is supposed to be edible, but it tastes horrible. Well, anyhow, in this episode I've been trying to include the most common things you meet when you walk in the field. This is also extremely common, and we saw it when it was younger in the previous video. Now it's blooming with yellow, of course, edible. And of course, mint. The villagers will wonder why I include that, but some people live in the city and they will not recognize the mint just by looking at it. All they need to do is rub a few leaves between their fingers. So I was taking basically photos of all the plants in my garden, and you see how many new edible I found for this episode, and amongst them only a couple of poisonous emerged. So do not be afraid of the wilderness. Almost everything is edible, and just with a little bit of knowledge you can avoid the poisonous species. Usually most of the members of a family of plants will be edible or not edible, but sometimes there is a mixture, like with this velch. The purple is listed as poisonous, but its white cousin is supposed to be edible, at least a little bit. And sadly, many medicinal plants are listed as poisonous, and somewhere as a small remark they write, but it is used as medicine. So sometimes they list medicinal plants as poisonous, but this doesn't mean that you should try out everything that is listed as poisonous, because some of them, like for example, lots of attractively looking berries, they are really poisonous. Some of them sharply poisonous. And for some of them, they can be both. Like, for example, if one eats one or two belladonna berries, it is medicinal. While if you eat like 7 of them, they say you will die. And more unbelievable absurdity. No trespassing signs to deter the government door to door. Vaccine checkers. In good number of countries, public life is practically forbidden for the non-fixed people. Many others are introducing the measures shortly. And here is a good question from an international student in Australia. To properly prepare for the apocalyptic times, he has to return to his home country and abandon his studies. So, what to do? I don't claim to know the exact correct answer for you, but if I was you, first of all, I would check if I can return to my own country without taking a test or a fix. Because if any of this is required, I would take it as a sign that the Lord doesn't want me to move at this point. Or at least that's my perspective. Other people have taken the test just to run to safety, yet other people acquire papers for the test without actually doing it. At many places, actually some countries, they claim that they require the test, but actually they don't check on the borders. That is there in some countries of Central Europe for sure. But in case you can get back to your country without acquiring any devilish certificate, then I would say my answer is I really don't know, because on the other hand, you've got only 2 more years left to study, and that's not much. There is a slight chance, very slight, but it is there, that after 2 years the rules for travel will not be stricter than now, because it still seems that we've got some 4 or maybe even 5 years more before the real hard apocalypse starts. That's a lot. And this nonsense with the bug, it's not gonna be like this forever until the end. They will not be able to maintain this strict tyranny, because their cobweb will be broken by the natural disasters and the social upheaval. And also, over time, they will be changing the fairy tales, scary fairy tales they tell to the public. Now it's a bug. Later on, it will be like more security threats or something like this. And during the times of transition between one scary boogeyman and another, we may get some short gap to breathe and maybe even travel internationally. It is possible, because in the Nina prophecies there was a mention that when Seraphim Sarovsky resurrects, some good people from abroad will travel to also see him and meet him. So that means at that time international travel will be open also for the good people. So, but we can't rely only on this. The Nina prophecies are not really, I would say, 100% confirmed, and also according to Nina herself, there are possible variations for many of the events. Not everything is set in stone, so we should not rely on this remark she made. So now we're at the moment when the Satanists they begin to waterboard humanity. They're just the beginning, and sometimes when they take our head out of the water, we get few gaps, few moments of freedom to breathe. So maybe we'll get some moments of freedom in future, and maybe you will have the chance to return later after you complete your studies. What is the chance of this happening? I have got no clue. And actually, I'm in a bit similar situation like you. I have also got two possible places where I could go for the great ordeal. Both are in the countryside, so they're similar, but still, I'm sure one of them could be better. I just don't know which, and I have prayed so much during the last 4 months, and still there is no answer. And there was this small incident which occurred with me during this last big storm, which I mentioned recently in the videos. So, literally hours before the storm, somehow my attention was drawn to this huge rose arch I have above the gate, which is precariously leaning on one side since a couple of years. It needs repair. I've always known that, but on this day I really noticed, and I thought I have to do that today. And then I walked past by, and as usual, I thought, well, I can't manage almost anything, so yeah, I skip it again. But then it was, I wouldn't say really like a voice with sound, but there was something inside really telling me, no, you have to do it today, you have to do it right now. And I did it. I just put a long wooden support for it. If I would have not put that because the arch got damaged during the storm, it would not only fall down and block my gate, but also hurt my old donkey, my car. So this is a very small incident. It cannot in any way compare to the apocalyptic times in magnitude, but it gave me a lot of confidence for me personally, because if there is some sort of destiny alarm system, even for such relatively insignificant things, then there should be really somebody listening to my prayers. Probably it's just too early for the answer, or I don't hear it, but somehow I felt that there is protection, although sometimes it seems to be very late. So you will have to pray yourself to find out the answer, and if you don't get any answer for a very long time, well, you will not be the only one, but I certainly got a very clear reassurance that there is somebody up there watching after me. And here they're not even hiding their plans. Vaccine passports are inevitable, and then why they will be more popular if we just call them something else. So now they are inviting everybody to join the Corona Club with a smile. They pretend to be nice with no violence, and it is not really compulsory yet. And they can still find customers for that story, but when the flow of customers ceases, there will be a different story. And then it will be probably again this security threat. And then more people will fall for it because they will think, well, now nobody is injecting me with anything. What's wrong with just having a card? And very, very few people will realize that that card, because it is connected constantly with the biometric database, does almost the same thing that the vaccine does inside the body. And stunned by the utter absurdity of their main program, the fixation, many people don't even notice smaller programs that they run they're very much below the radar. Like, for example, the changes of the postal system. And the latest thing they are doing here is they are working even with the biggest website for selling second-hand things. The central government post is working with them on a new system which will ensure that even if you want to sell your old slippers, it can be done only if it goes through the control of the government. And many other such similar, seemingly less important issue, and indeed if they are isolated they are not very important, but the sum total of them is very important. And I've been talking a lot about securing supplies for the next 10 years. And I'm not sure if the difficulty with the supplies will be first in terms of shortage of food stuff, or they will make it like one of the privileges of the fixed people to be able to buy as much food as they want. While the devils, which for all practical purposes are extraterrestrials, are openly taking over Earth, they are still entertaining the gullible people with ideas that we are looking for connection with extraterrestrial intelligence, ufology. Recently I found the best definition of ufology, finally. It is not a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, it is a search of terrestrial intelligence on Earth. In other words, they're just checking out how many people will be stupid enough to buy and listen to their stories, and those who don't buy them. And that's a signal, like a beep beep in the devilish headquarters. There is still some human intelligence left on Earth. And it is getting more and more clear by the day that those who do not want to join the Devil's Club, they will somehow find a way to do it. While those who have still too many unclean qualities inside, they will find some of the devil's reasons appealing. In other words, if you find yourself in a situation that you see no way out besides accepting their devilish programs, now it is fixation, later on it will be something else, then you're going somehow the wrong way. Or let's say the way that will end in misery, because if something exists, if God has created it in this way, it shouldn't be wrong. The way to hell, it's not really exactly wrong if it exists, but it's certainly not pleasant. And for those of us who have decided not to join the Donkey Club no matter what, we should not see the problems in terms of the unpleasant side, but more as purification. For example, in the beginning of this year, when I decided not to go to the shops anymore, much, and just eat whatever fresh I find around, mostly. In the beginning, I was a bit, how to say, wary. Will I find enough? Will it be tasty? But now, when I look back, I see that it was for good that I took this radical step all of a sudden to stop going and shopping for vegetables, for example. From today on, I decided. And from the next day, I found lots of tasty things in the forest. And there was a big bonus. Also, I feel that now that I'm mostly grazing herbs and all these plants which are alive and have their consciousness, I also feel subtly that it also, just by itself, has some purification effect on my consciousness. While from the perspective of my neighbors, they think, poor wretched thing, can't even buy vegetables anymore. While for me it's a really lovely experience. I have a diary now. Every day I try new herbs. I record my experiences, what changes I feel after every herb. It's quite interesting. It's really like opening doors to nature which I thought didn't have time to explore before. And then let's take the story of banning everybody who doesn't have the mark of the beast from social places and gatherings, and in some countries even shopping for non-essential goods, anything besides food and medicines. That may sound like bad news, but it is actually good news that while life is still more or less normal, yeah, we have things to eat and our houses are still standing. While still this is going on, we are getting clear signs of what is about to come, and you know, it's better don't to go to their social gatherings, which are full of possessed people, basically, if we have to be honest. If we are banned from the shops selling clothes, for example, well, it's good that the ban is at least gradual, and at this point we can buy them maybe online or on some other market where we're still allowed, or somehow procure them if we are innovative enough, or we get them before the ban comes in force. So at least the message is clear, and we have enough time to prepare. Everything is fine. Later on, we will just concentrate on the main thing, purifying our consciousness instead of looking for clothes. And sooner or later, probably in a couple of years, it will be exactly like that sentence in the prophecies. It said that rather sooner than later in the apocalypse, people will be basically stuck in their homes with nowhere to go, and they will realize that they are absolutely helpless against these forces which move the events. At that time, the people for whom life meant football and beer, they will be depressed and sulking until oblivion at home, while the wise people of the Lord, they will make a smart use of this time with deepening their understanding of the subtle world, which will not be closed for them. Like, for example, one thing we could do at that time is connect with the spirits of the plants. So, some 25 or 30 years ago, the Western world learned about ayahuasca, and then slowly, Western people started going to mainly Peru, but also Brazil and Ecuador, and they started benefiting from ayahuasca, and then many of them started learning about it, and eventually they started learning about connecting with the plant spirits of other sacred plants. The key word for that is master plants. So the process, the way, the protocol to connect to a plant spirit, even to the point when you can even talk to it and it will teach you things, tell you things. The key word for that is master plant dieta. However, I'm not gonna use the dieta word because it's very misleading. As of the nature of the process, yes, there are dietary changes during the days which you are devoting to this endeavor, but they're not the main thing. The main thing is the isolation from this world and a few other factors. The food is not the most important one for sure. That's why I'm going to use the Hindu word sadhana, which basically describes the very same process, the very same method. However, in the Hindustan context, the Sanatana Dharma context, they use it to kind of melt together your spirit with the spirit of a given deity, usually with the use of mantras. Sometimes they also did sacred plants, not so much anymore. But that is there as well, and the mantras are there in the Amazon jungle as well. They are called Ikaro, sacred chants. And the Ikaros are also very important in the Amazonian sadhanas, because if the sadhana is successful, it very often the spirit will teach the successful practitioner a particular melody song, entire song, with which the future shaman can connect with that spirit at any time in the future when he needs help. And since over the last 2 decades, and mostly the last decade, many so called Western people figured out the process of the sadhana, the Amazonian sadhana. They decided let's apply that and try to connect to our local plant spirits of our area. I have heard about this thing going on at several places already in Europe. I will leave one link in the description. And there are some interesting cases already. One lady was actually contacted by the spirit of the rosa. The roses are sacred plants also in the Peruvian Amazon. And she didn't even understand, well, why am I getting obsessed with this song about the roses? And later on, the spirit actually explained to her that this is a sacred chant. Of course, not everybody who does Amazonian plant sadhanas can reach the level of learning songs directly from the spirits. I guess it will be a small percentage who manage, but some reach that point. But even those who don't, they report profound changes after doing such sadhanas and purification of their soul, very intense. In a week, they could accomplish to change that much as they have been changing over the period of years doing meditation, at least the way Westerners understand it. So we've got sacred so-called master plants in Europe as well. The datura, the roses, the basil, the sacred Indian tulsis, nothing else but a type of basil. I don't know if it is more special than the European varieties, because also the tulsi in India, that also is not a single species. That's there is a bunch of them, and these brave souls in Europe who are spending considerable part of their life in isolation, trying to make contact with these spirits, they will bring to us the methods, the correct, forgotten, and lost methods of how to take this plant, exactly the dosage, the preparation, how often, everything, and eventually even the sacred chants. That is the real future of the herbal medicine. So somebody might wonder, what's the use of connecting with the plant spirits when there will be apocalypse around? Actually, having friends amongst the plant spirits is more or less like having an extra guardian angel. They will not stop the armed checkers from going around in your area, but most likely they would have inspired you to go somewhere else just shortly before the checkers arrive at your door. Your plant spirit friends are unlikely to cancel a hail, the size of a car it would be during the end times, according to the prophecies. They will not cancel it for the area just because of you, but most likely it will so happen that shortly before it starts, something will urge you to go exactly at the place where you personally will be sheltered. Because that is the way the spirits, the benevolent spirits, have been always helping people. And this idea that the real help is only if somebody organizes a revolution with guns, otherwise nothing will help, this is a clever trick implanted in people's minds by the Hollywood to confuse the people so that they will not know what is the real help and will give up and surrender without even asking for help from one's real well-wishers.